On the morning of March 15, 2018, Dave walked into work just like he had every day for the past 11 years. He straightened the shelves, he greeted his coworkers, he unlocked the front door. And then his manager pulled him aside and said, "Don't bother unpacking the truck. We're closing tonight." Dave had no warning, no severance package, no explanation beyond the company is bankrupt. Across the country, that same conversation happened in 735 stores on the same day to 33,000 people. Meanwhile, on the other side of that story, the two firms that own Toys R Us had already collected $470 million in fees. The same week Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy, one of those firms, KKR, reported record profits. You know that feeling. You've had that feeling. And what I'm about to show you is exactly how a group of men in Manhattan decided that the irreplaceable piece of your childhood was worth less than their management fees. Amazon didn't kill Toys R Us. Walmart didn't kill Toys R Us. This is what actually happened.
So we're there all the time for Pops.
I may be almost 20 years old, but I am a Toys R Us kid.
You know, I'm a 32-year-old man going to Toys R Us for toys for myself.
We saw the fan ball in here, so we came over here right away.
This is great, and I hope that there's more of these kind of little displays throughout the country.
Toys R Us is the best place ever, man.
It started in 1948. Charles Lazarus, a 25-year-old son of a bicycle repairman in Washington, D.C., opened a baby furniture store. But he noted something. The parents buying cribs kept coming back. And when they came back, they weren't buying furniture anymore. They were buying toys. So in 1957, Charles Lazarus made a bet. He converted his store, renamed it, and built something the world had never seen before: a toy superstore. Not a toy section, not a toy aisle, a temple dedicated entirely to children. By the 1980s, Toys R Us was unstoppable. When a kid walked through those doors, something happened. The ceilings were high, the aisles were long, and everywhere you looked, color. G.I. Joe, Barbie, Nintendo, Cabbage Patch Kids, Stretch Armstrong. You could spend an entire afternoon just walking the aisles and never touch a single thing. That feeling, that specific electric feeling, is one of the most universally shared childhood memories in American history. At its height, Toys R Us controlled 25% of the entire toy market in the United States, not a quarter of the toy store market, a quarter of all toy sales in the entire country. Charles Lazarus was so powerful that toy manufacturers, Hasbro, Mattel, the biggest names in the world, had to negotiate with him just to get shelf space. He didn't go to them, they came to him. That jingle, you already sang it in your head, didn't you? That's what this company was. It wasn't just a store, it was a feeling. It was Saturday mornings. It was birthday lists written in crayon. It was standing in front of a shelf for 20 minutes, unable to choose. It was childhood itself. By the early 2000s, Toys R Us was struggling. Amazon was growing, Walmart was undercutting on price. The company made a critical mistake. They signed a deal with Amazon to be the exclusive toy seller on the platform. Then Amazon broke that deal and let other vendors in. Toys R Us sued, and while that lawsuit dragged through the courts, they fell behind on building their own online store. They needed capital. They needed time to catch up. They needed a partner. Enter Wall Street. In 2005, they found three: KKR, Bain Capital, Vornado Realty. Three of the most powerful private equity and real estate firms on the planet. They offered to take Toys R Us private, off the stock market, away from the quarterly pressure of public investors. The pitch was simple: we'll give you breathing room to restructure and compete. The board said yes. Big mistake. The deal was valued at $6.6 billion. But here's what they didn't fully understand, and what would eventually kill them. In a leveraged buyout, which is exactly what this was, the private equity firms don't use their own money to buy the company. They use the company's own future earnings as collateral. They borrow billions from banks. Then they hand that debt to the company they just bought. Imagine you work for a company and it takes out a loan from a bank, but instead of using its property as collateral, it decides to use its future earnings, including your salary, as collateral. that means whatever they earn in the future will continue to be paid to the bank. In other words, Toys R Us was forced to take out a loan it didn't ask for to fund its own purchase by people who now owned it. That is not a partnership. That is a trap. Overnight, Toys R Us went from carrying roughly $1.8 billion in long-term debt to carrying nearly $5 billion. $5 billion. Every single year, Toys R Us now had to pay somewhere between $400 million and $500 million just in interest before it paid a single employee, before it stocked a single shelf, before it built a single new store or upgraded a single website. To put that in perspective, Target spends roughly $40 million a year on digital improvements. Walmart spends hundreds of millions. Toys R Us, buried under $500 million in annual interest payments, could barely afford to update their checkout systems. While their competitors were investing billions in e-commerce, mobile apps, and supply chain upgrades, Toys R Us was handing $400 million a year directly to banks. This was not a fair fight. It was never a fair fight. For 12 years after the buyout, Toys R Us tried to compete. They really did. They launched an e-commerce site, they redesigned stores, they brought in new management. They tried loyalty programs, private label toys, baby product expansions. They opened Babies R Us as a parallel brand. They tried everything within their reach. But their reach was always shorter than it should have been, because every dollar they generated, the debt absorbed. In 2016, Toys R Us reported $11.5 billion in sales. That sounds impressive, but after debt service, operational costs, and the structural inefficiencies that come from chronic underinvestment, they had almost nothing left. Former employees later described the atmosphere inside headquarters in Wayne, New Jersey, as a slow-motion funeral. Leadership changed 5 times in 10 years. Every new CEO came in with a plan. Every plan ran into the same wall: the debt. Here's the part that should make your blood boil. While Toys R Us was suffocating, while it was cutting staff, deferring maintenance, and falling further behind its competitors, KKR and Bain Capital were collecting management fees. Every year, fees paid by Toys R Us to the firms that owned it, for the privilege of being owned. Imagine working for someone and still paying them. That's what it felt like. By the time Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy in September 2017, KKR and Bain had collected an estimated $470 million in fees and other payments from the company over the life of the deal. $470 million. When Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2017, the official message was optimistic. They called it a restructuring, a reset, a chance to emerge leaner and stronger. The public wanted to believe it. Employees wanted to believe it. Parents and children who had grown up in those aisles, they wanted to believe it. But the debt was too deep. The hole was too wide. And in March 2018, it was over. Toys R Us announced it would liquidate all 735 of its U.S. stores. 735 stores. 33,000 employees. Gone. Overnight.
When the last Toys R Us closed, something more than a store closed with it. Think about what you lost, not as a business story, as a memory. You lost the place where you pointed at the Lego set on Christmas Eve and hoped your parents were watching. You lost the place where your parents used to bribe you into good behavior with the promise of one trip, just one, before your birthday. You lost the place where you could hold a toy for 20 minutes and the staff wouldn't say a word because they understood. Jeffrey the giraffe, those red shopping carts, the smell of a brand new board game box. That's gone, and it didn't have to be. In the months after the bankruptcy, former employees and advocacy groups demanded that KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado contribute severance packages for the 33,000 workers who lost their jobs with little to no notice. Initially, the firms refused. It took a coordinated national campaign of protests, workers showing up at KKR and Bain offices in New York and Boston, going to their investor events, calling out their executives by name, before the firms agreed to create a $20 million hardship fund. $20 million for 33,000 people. That's roughly $606 per person. Imagine working for a company for 10 years, and when you get laid off, you have to beg to get paid $606, not even up to a month's pay. KKR had collected $470 million in fees. Toys R Us was not an isolated case. The same leveraged buyout playbook has been used on Sears, Payless Shoe Source, Radio Shack, Pier 1 Imports, Bed Bath & Beyond, J. Crew, Neiman Marcus. The list goes on. The formula is always the same. Buy a beloved institution using borrowed money, charge it fees, extract dividends, run it lean. When the debt crushes it, call it disruption. Blame Amazon, blame consumers, blame anyone but the balance sheet you constructed. This is a business model that profits from the slow destruction of companies that millions of people love.
What was lost wasn't just a retailer. It was a shared experience that an entire civilization had in common. Something that made strangers into neighbors and made children feel like the world was made for them. Amazon didn't take that. Walmart didn't take that. Two firms on Wall Street took that for $470 million in fees and walked away clean. Charles Lazarus, the man who built all of it, the stores, the jingle, the magic, died in 2018. He died 6 days after Toys R Us announced it was closing every store. He was 94 years old. And that was how Toys R Us fell.